We say things like, maybe later, perhaps another time, or I'll see you tomorrow. But for some of us, there won't be a tomorrow. Listen as your worst nightmares come to life. These nightmares have become someone's reality. My name is Justin Crowley, and this is The Murder Project. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 20 of The Murder Project. Yay, we made it to episode 20. Everybody give yourselves a round of applause, and thank you so much for hanging out with us and sticking with the podcast. We really appreciate it. It means a lot to us. We're having a great time. We're doing the thing, and we really enjoy it.
Many thanks.
So in this episode of The Murder Project, we are going to be doing a part 2 for the episode of Two Not Cops. And that is where Mike and I sit down and we talk about our years that we spent in law enforcement. We kind of give you a little detailed information. We give you some stories. We're pretty much going to give you all of it as we go along in this process. Now, last episode, we talked about how we got into law enforcement and how some of that worked out as we went through the academy and we were just getting in. In this episode, we're going to continue that trend. We're going to give you a little more detail about what happened when we transitioned out into patrol, some stories that went along with that, and also situations that you might find yourself in and how to act to them accordingly. So strap in, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 20 starts right now. Welcome to the Murder Project, everybody. My name is Justin Crowley. With me, as always, my best homie, Mike Smith. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. It is another episode of Two Not Cops.
My favorite.
I know. Part 2, Two Not Cops. We love doing these. This is where we get to kind of relax and just let our hair down. We don't have any, but
I don't.
We're gonna
sure don't.
We're gonna metaphorically let our hair down.
I do like these. First of all, I love the title. Always have. Even when we started talking about this so long ago.
Yep. It's been
so making it come into reality is very satisfying. Plus, it just rolls off the tongue. The Two Not Cops. That sounds great.
Yeah. And I want to apologize. On that last episode, I noticed that I had a few spikes in the old mic situation, my microphone, because, as I mentioned, I got the microphone setup that we were supposed to be using, but that other microphone that I was using, my face had to be like literally on the microphone. And now I actually have a little space, a little breathing room. But from time to time, I forget, and I just smash it right on in there.
You do,
I just cram my cram hole right on top of that thing.
It made me flinch a few times when you were like, whoosh, and I was like, hey.
Yeah, luckily, and I also, it's a different setup, so I keep hitting it with my hands, but I'm going to keep them down at my side this time.
That's smart.
Yeah, so, all right, this episode, we wanted to kind of move past where we were at last time. We're going to just kind of continue this journey that we had in law enforcement. And I think, do you want to start out? Because Mike and I were talking about my situation is a little bit different because I have jail. I worked in the jail for a little while, and then I broke out of the jail and went into patrol. And then I have my jail experience and I have my patrol experience under the same umbrella, but two definitely different experiences. So I'm going to kind of walk back and forth in between both of those experiences, and I'll let you know when I'm transitioning between the two, obviously. But it's kind of hard for me to separate those two things just because it's all kind of happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to call this episode Fresh on the Beat.
That's exactly right. Because we were just so fresh and on the beat.
Yeah, just so ignorant.
Yeah.
So excited, but just had no idea what we were about to step into. They try to warn you and educate you, and they do the best they can. But nothing beats experience.
No, and you'll figure that out really quickly. When you graduate from the academy, you're feeling like you're on top of the world. And the first day, I remember, because when I graduated from the academy, I just went back to the jail because I had to wait a period of time before I went out to patrol. So really nothing changed for me, except I got a new badge. One said corrections. I got my deputy badge.
Mm-hmm.
And then
move.
And then I just went back to my shift and continued working like usual. But then that first day you show up for FTO, I kind of feel like you realize like, oh gosh, this is real, like right now. And I think for me, it was the first time you showed up to a call and you engage the public in a scenario that you were just kind of like, I mean, you've been hearing this stuff the whole time, especially for me. I worked in the jail, so I worked in booking a lot. So I would read the P3s, which is the narrative sheet that the officer fills out. It's got your name, date of birth, all your information, and it's got a narrative part where they write down like what the elements of the crime are that gave the officer the PC to arrest you.
Right.
And so I typed out thousands of these. I mean, I don't even know how many people I booked in 4 years.
Yeah, that would be hard to keep track of because both the county jails that service the city of Amarillo stay very busy.
Yeah, and so I heard and saw a lot of this stuff going on, but for some reason when I got out there and started experiencing it myself for the first time, I was just like, oh no, I'm scared.
Yeah.
And that's like, say, your first family violence call, or the first time you have to actually do standardized field sobriety testing on somebody, SFSTs.
Yeah, I'm just glad I had the clipboard, the cheater clipboard.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot to remember.
Yeah. Are you talking about on SFSTs?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. And then your victim paperwork, your family violence paperwork, your DIC paperwork for your DWIs, like all your DUIs, whatever you call them, your forms and just the process and booking evidence and all that. It can seem overwhelming, but it's just like anything else, you know. It's like, how do you eat an elephant, man? Just one bite at a time.
One bite at a time. Yeah. That's right.
So is there anything to you that kind of sticks out? Like when you first went to patrol, you're an FTO, you fresh rookie, your boots are shine, your uniform's pressed, you're ready to roll, you're ready to get out there. And that could be the first time somebody pulled a practical joke on you, because that'll happen. I got a good story about that. And then
I don't remember any practical jokes that I experienced. You do get to, meet a lot of the people that you work with, and their experience varies. I went to evening shift, so I worked 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. So there were a bunch of guys that had been in for a few years. Of course, the people with the most experience are on day shift.
Yeah.
They got them good hours and them good days off. My first days off were Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
Because Amarillo PD works 4/10s and a great deal of overtime. As much as they'd like to help that, you do end up getting a couple hours of overtime just from like reports, paperwork, photos, booking evidence, which that's a process.
Yeah.
It's not difficult, but it just depends on how much you manage to collect through the day.
Yeah.
Because you have to bag it separately, make sure you have all the pertinent information to book it, photographs. You do get issued like a pretty legit digital camera from the department, and you better use it.
Yeah, we had one. They gave us pretty nice digital cameras too. And then like your chain of custody, if you have to put that in with your evidence. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that the average person wouldn't realize, that this process is so extensive, and it's from one point to the next point to the next point. And it's from the time the call comes in to the time you show up. You get all your evidence, you get everything booked in. That goes to a different person who's in the crime scene area. And then that person also is going to be different than the person who is assigned to the case, being the detective. And then that person is the one that's going to take it to the DA's office to present the case to see if it's even taken. And if the DA's office decides to go ahead and take the case, then all of these people are now involved all the way up through the trial, if there is one. If there's not, and they decide that either it pleads out or they don't take the case, basically all of that, it's not for nothing, but it's all of that pretty much just, it goes away and you start on the next one. And I found out that really early in my career that I never went back and looked to see what cases went and what didn't.
Yeah, normally you just gauge that by subpoenas.
Yeah, I used to, that's exactly right. If you get subpoenaed to court, then your case is going to court. That doesn't mean that it didn't get pled out. But I know in the beginning, I used to look and see which of my cases went and which of them didn't, because I wanted to know if I was doing something wrong. But what I realized later on is that if you do something wrong, they're going to let you know.
Oh, they sure
You don't
are.
have to go and dig through all these reports to try to see what happened. If you mess something up, trust me, you be getting a phone call. And if you're on midnights, it's going to be while you're sleeping.
Yeah, if it's bad, the detective themselves will call you and be like, you need to fix yourself immediately. Supplement. But normally they just pass it on to your supervisor who grills you in the office about it and you have to go fix it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I came out on evenings and pretty much it was this for the first couple weeks, which, you know, the first few days were terrifying because you're like, oh man, I'm ready to go. Now I'm in service, and then calls start coming in. On evenings, it's almost guaranteed you're going to sign into your in-car computer, and that's what tells dispatch that you're ready to go most of the time. You can call it out on the radio. They have a 10 code for that, but you don't have to because they know your little thing's going to populate. So I was 351, and that's the southwestern side of Amarillo. And it was like, as soon as I logged in, seconds later, like I wasn't even backed out of I wasn't even pulling away from my spot yet where I loaded my car up with like my go bag and stuff. And it was like, bloop. And it was like 351. And I was like, oh man.
Already. Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't actually recall my very first call for service. And a call for service is basically when somebody calls the emergency or non-emergency line to the police department and says they got a problem. Depending on what it is, it gets classified. They get all the pertinence. Dispatch gets all the pertinence, and then they send you on the call. And that's when they call you.
Are you talking about you don't remember your first call for FTO or after you got off?
Oh, no, this is after FTO. Because we discussed FTO a little bit last time. So basically where I'm picking up is I'm all by myself.
Yeah.
Like I'm fresh on the beat. I'm 351 now during the hours of 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. That's my beat, even though ultimately it really doesn't matter. If you're available and somebody needs help, they're going to send you no matter where that is. But they do try to stick to like your side of town. So the 4 cardinals, your north, east, south, and west.
Yep.
And so I think it was my first call was a theft from vehicle.
Yeah.
I believe that was my first one, which basically means somebody either had their window broken out, had their car broken into with force, or more often than not, it was just left unlocked, which is still a crime, however unfortunate it may be that you leave it unlocked.
My actual first call was a theft as well. I remember I went, the 10 code that we use is we go 1041. Y'all use the same code.
Mm-hmm.
So I got on my radio. I'm in my car. I'm jazzed up. I'm ready to go. I get on the radio, 638, 1041, and dispatch 10-4, 638, and then be en route 2.
Yep.
And I was like, oh no. And then I heard it was a theft call, and I was like, okay, it's I can get my stuff together. I've got all my sheets and my information sheets to fill out for witnesses or suspects, or I got everything ready to go. And then I went over there, and it was I think someone had broken into somebody's car or had stole something off their property by their vehicle. It was something like that. But it was real kind of easy. I went in there and took the information down, took some pictures, had them fill out the statement, and, went back to the office. And it was one of those crimes where, unfortunately, I know a lot of people are like, oh, something got stole out of my vehicle. The cops ain't even going to be able to do anything about it. We have to understand we can only work with what we have.
That's true.
If you say that I came outside and I parked my truck around noon, I went in the house, I had a nap, ate lunch, did something, whatever, and then you called me at 3. And so sometime between noon and 3, somebody came by and stole something out of your vehicle. And let's just say for this instance, a backpack.
Mm-hmm.
Someone stole my backpack out of my vehicle. Okay, do you have any surveillance? No. Okay, can you tell me what was in the backpack? Well, my computer was in there. All right, what is it? It's a Acer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any information on it? No. Because I'll tell anybody this. I still do this. It does not matter what I have electronic wise. When I buy it, I write down the serial number or the numbers that are on the actual TV or the computer or the
serial numbers and stuff.
Any serial numbers that I have, I write them down, because if the information that I was given on that call basically was we'd have to get lucky and somebody would have to sit at a desk and call pawn shops regularly to say, hey, did you get an Acer laptop pawned in the last 3 days?
And that's happening on the reg. So it's a really good time to point out that more often than not, when it comes to theft of nearly any kind, they are not going to catch the person off the rip, if at all, because unless you have surveillance, Ring doorbells. Those weren't even a thing.
No.
Cameras or anything to catch the person doing it. But you have to imagine how difficult it must be to catch somebody stealing something. These are people, most thieves are people that have done it regularly. Mm-hmm. So they're going around, they walk right up in your driveway, and they just check your car door. Or they see the windows down, or they see your weed eater just sitting out by your shed. And so you're not going to catch these people. And we can still take the report, and we're obligated to do so, and we will. And I said, by we, I mean police officers. But it doesn't mean you're going to catch the person. And it's a really unfortunate truth to being in law enforcement, because you get a lot of flack for that from time to time. But it's not anything you can control. That person grabbed that thing, and they gone.
Yeah, unless you got you a night fox somewhere.
That's right.
And I'll tell you, there have been instances where we caught people that were doing. I mean, I caught people when I worked on midnights that were out burglarizing vehicles and doing things like that. That's one of the things that proactive patrolling that you get to do on midnights that you don't get to do sometimes on evenings because you're so busy. Mm-hmm. But we would go out on midnight shift when I was on patrol, and we would search around for people that were out burglarizing vehicles or houses or shops or anything. Because in the county that I worked for, we didn't have a beat. We just operated inside the county.
Just the whole county.
The whole county. And not so much inside the city limits, because the city had that pretty well wrapped up. But if we were slow, I used to catch a lot of flack because I like to dip into the city a little bit on my shift just to try to find some things, because you're also bored. You're a little bit bored. There's not much going on sometimes. And so I'd kind of dip into the city limits a little bit and see if I can find myself. So a lot of guys I worked with like to call me APD 638 because that was my unit number, obviously, is 638, but they always call me APD 638 because they said I was always in the city.
Yeah, that'll get you in trouble out there if you ain't careful.
And I didn't mind it. My supervisor was pretty good about it as long as there wasn't a whole lot of stuff going on. And I was cognizant about the fact that if we're busy, I'm not in the city. I'm running calls with my fellow deputies, and I'm doing the things that I need to be doing. But if it's dead, I'm out driving. I'm driving anywhere I can think of to try to find something. Yeah. And even if it's a situation where if you get pulled over, I know sometimes people will say like the most minute traffic infraction, and they're like, "Bro, there's all this stuff going on out here." Because I pull people over on midnights for tag lights, for turn signals, for defective headlights, defective tail lights. I'd pull up, but it wasn't to give you a ticket. And that's one of the good things about being at the county where I worked out, is that we were really not encouraged whatsoever to ever write tickets because we work for an elected official.
Right.
Whereas the city does not. And we do not have any revenue base off tickets. Now, I know a lot of people think that certain places have quotas.
Yeah.
That's not true.
That is a really good thing to bring up. Yeah. There is no such thing as a quota, at least not in the state of Texas.
Not anywhere I've worked or anybody I've heard. Yeah, that I've worked around that heard of.
Basically, if you go a whole shift and you do nothing, they're going to question that.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you're filling those voids of time, depending on the hour of the day, by, watching stop signs, watching lights, which I'll talk about later, because the only time I ever went to trial was for a stoplight. And it's a great story, so we'll get there here shortly. But yeah, you got to stay active. You got to make sure that you're doing your job. But yeah, going back to what you were saying, when it gets dark out, that's a very exciting time especially as a rookie police officer, because now, provided you're not getting calls for service left and right, which more than likely will happen on evenings, but sometimes it don't. If you're lucky, you get to actually be the hunter.
Yep.
And that's what you train for. And you got it in your head. That's what you're out there to do. But you also get crammed with calls for service. So when that doesn't happen, you go into your neighborhoods and you dark out your lights, and you just start creeping. And it is one of the coolest feelings I remember is you're looking for people that are being shady. Yep. And you're going to hone that and get much better at it as you go along. So basically, when you're a rookie cop, everybody's shady.
Yeah. You feel like it.
What are you doing walking? What are you doing riding a child? What is a grown man riding a child's bike down the street doing? Stop. I need to talk to you. Which, a really good time to point out that if a cop asks you to stop and you're not doing anything wrong, legally you don't have to. which I did experience on multiple occasions. But more often than not, they're just asking what you're doing. Tell them what you're doing.
Yeah.
Now, if you're going to be protective, which is well within your rights, and you're at this point, you are not obligated to identify yourself.
Right.
They're going to ask. That's their job. They are trained to do that. Don't be offended. If they're like, hey, man, what are you doing out here? It's late or cold. Because, you'd be surprised how many people are out walking the mean streets of Amarillo and it's 30 degrees out.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, that's not very reasonable or prudent. And those are two very important words as a law enforcement officer. And you're like, hey, what are you doing? And they're like, nothing, I'm walking. And you're like, oh, okay. Hey, man, you got an ID? And they want to be like, I'm not giving you an ID. What am I doing wrong? They're correct.
Yes, that's correct.
But also, you got to make sure that you're stopping them for the right reason. So
yeah, and it is. I actually, that's funny you say that, because I stopped a guy on a bike one time that was he's riding his bike in the street the wrong direction, and in Texas on a bicycle you still have to follow
that's right
traffic code.
Mm-hmm.
And so he also did not have a headlamp or a front light or back light on his bike, which is also required.
It is
if
required.
You're riding at night. And so I stopped him, and it was one of those situations where I said, hey, man, I'm stopping you for this. I need your ID. And he's like, I don't have to ID you. And I was like, well, normally you might not have to, but in this circumstance, because you're breaking traffic law, you do. And so make sure, I want people to realize that you have to make sure and know where you're operating at.
That's right.
Because if you start down this path and you're 100% certain that you do not have to produce ID and you're wrong.
Mm-hmm. You're going to look real foolish in a minute.
Yeah. And especially if you get a fail to identify or something like that, which it's kind of, there's more circumstantial. It gets a little bit deeper than that. But in this situation, the guy's like, okay, here's my ID. And I'm like, hey, what you got in that backpack? And he's like, my stuff. And it's 2:00 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking to myself, this guy's probably out burglarizing people.
That's pretty shady.
I'm thinking that.
Yeah.
Because like you said, we're out really trying to, trying to make that difference.
That's it.
And I was like, you mind if I take a look in there? And he's like, yeah, I do mind actually. And I was like, okay, well, so can I? And he's like, no. And then I start, because you're going to get to a point as a rookie officer, you're going to get to a point for the first time that someone tells you no.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to throw you for a loop. Just like Mike was saying, we are trained to ask questions.
Yeah.
It is our job to be in your business. That's what they want you to do. And that's when I said I would pull people over for anything at nighttime, not to give them tickets, just to see what they were doing. So if I pulled somebody over and I walk up to the vehicle, I'm like, oh, it smells like alcohol in here. Or, oh, you start finding reasons.
Paraphernalia in the console.
Yeah. If everything's legit, that person leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people are like, oh, I really hate that. I really hate the fact that people do that or cops do that. Once again, that's legislated laws. Okay?
That's right.
So they're there so cops can use them, and cops don't write laws. They just enforce them.
That's right.
So if you don't like the laws, I mentioned this in the last Two Not Cops. If you don't like the laws, you have to petition your legislators because they're not the ones that control that. But I remember that guy, and he's like, no. And I was like thinking to myself, how can I get this?
Right.
How can I get into that backpack?
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that I came up with was I can arrest him on the traffic offenses.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can inventory the backpack and by way of searching it.
That's right.
But I decided not to.
Right. And that's going to happen a lot. You're going to be like, you know what? This isn't worth it. I don't feel like I have a strong enough idea of to the level of this person's shadiness.
Yeah.
And so, you know what? I'm going to take the L on this. Have a nice night.
Yeah, and that's what I did. What I said was I'm gonna write you warnings for the traffic offenses. You need to make sure that if you don't have your light, you need to be up on the sidewalk or whatever, but you need to get home.
Right.
And because I was sitting in my car running the guy, he didn't have any wants or warrants. I ran his criminal history, and he had a few things on there, but nothing that really stuck out to me that was like, oh, this guy's a bad guy.
This dude's a thief.
Yeah, this guy's a thief. And so in my head, I thought, do I arrest him to search his bag, or is that, I had a personal issue with that. When it came down to it, like you said, I took the L. I went back over there. I handed him 2 warnings, for the offenses. And I'm like, see you later. Because in my idea, it was bad guys are usually always bad guys. And one of the things that I hated the most when I worked in law enforcement is if I worked with anybody that said they may beat the charge, but they won't beat the ride. And that was one of those things that stuck out to me as saying, like, you're kind of saying up front that you know this probably won't go to court because the evidence isn't strong enough, but you're going to book them in jail anyways. They're going to have to get bonded out of jail. This is going to be a whole huge ordeal for this person and their family or whoever has to bond them out. And you're coming up with money and you're doing all this stuff. I don't like that. And there was a scenario like that where, you know, bad guys always be bad guys.
That's true. And that's really good that you did that. And I was very similar. If I didn't feel comfortable arresting somebody, I would not do it.
No.
I refused. I didn't want to be that guy. And most cops don't. They don't want to be that guy. They just are trying to do their job. And if somebody is, you know, tactful, maybe even polite, cordial, maybe, then you'd be surprised what a law dog is willing to let slide if you're being cool with them.
Yeah, officer discretion.
That's right.
All day.
I mean, a lot of the things that you work on evenings, especially in the first few hours, because you're just getting on right before the rush hour. Yeah. Everybody heading home. And Amarillo's not the biggest city, but the traffic sure feels like otherwise.
Yeah.
So you just get accidents on accidents or 1050s.
Yeah.
And so you go to these accidents, because I did a lot of those as a rookie. A lot. Yep. You get very familiar with filling out, what is it, CR3?
DPS did our accidents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, but
Sorry.
I could go up there and, you know, a traffic accident is exactly that. Maybe someone is at fault, but it's still called an accident. It's not called a traffic on purpose.
Yeah.
Nobody meant for it to happen, but Texas law says someone has to be at fault. And more often than not, you as the patrol officer taking care of this accident has to be the one to determine that.
Yeah, you determine who's at fault.
But what I mean by more often than not is that sometimes there are some tricky ones that you can't figure out. But most of the time it's pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. You know, somebody following too closely, failing to, you know, control speed. That's a big one that is a catch-all. If somebody's trying to beat a light and they second guess it and they romp the brakes and you run into the back of them thinking you were going to sneak through that light too, that is your fault. You don't have to like it. And you can argue that they improperly braked all day. Mm-hmm. You will not win. You can take it to court. You will not win. So a lot of times I'd go up there and I know this is probably the worst thing to happen to this person in recent time. So I'm like, hey, you know, I'm like, I need all your information. I need your driver's license, your insurance. I'm going to look at their little registration tag and know what's up. And a lot of times people are not very happy. And the last person that they want to see arriving at the scene of their accident, which could be quite minor, as most accidents are, is the cop who's there to start pointing fingers.
Yeah.
And you get the gamut. I'll never forget that, because you get people that are like, man, this is really unfortunate. It's my fault. You're like, okay, cool. I'm glad that you said that. Unfortunately, I am obligated by the state of Texas to issue a citation for insert traffic law here. And there's no way around it. I have to do that. And if you can identify who is at fault in an accident, you have to write a citation.
Yeah.
That's just the law. Trust me, most cops don't like doing that because it's a crummy feeling when you're like, oh man, you busted up your Hellcat. Here's a ticket.
Yeah. You're like, your vehicle is totaled. By the way, if you could sign this for me, this is not admission of guilt. There's a promise to appear.
Promise to appear, yeah. Like you're just trying to smooth that one over.
Yeah.
And then you have the opposite side of the spectrum that they are furious and they want justice now.
Yeah.
And you're going to help them get it. And they're going to fight passionately, regardless of any evidence available, that they are not at fault. Yeah. And if they're young, a lot of times, post-accident, parents be showing up.
Yeah.
And now they're mad, especially if you have to look at some 19-year-old girl, college student, who got into a little fender bender, and her dad shows up and he is flaming mad. And he's like, it is impossible that my darling princess.
This is an impossibility.
It is. Yeah. And they get mad and I was a rookie cop. So I was like, oh man, this dude is so angry. And I'm like, look, I'm just doing my job, man. She ran into the back of him. Well, he must have braked improperly. No.
Yeah.
That means that she was following too closely or not paying attention, and she ran into him. It's pretty common sense. Did you hit that person? You're probably going to be at fault.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, it's one of those things where you hate saying that someone is directly at fault, especially if it's something like a traffic accident or any scenario like that, or like when I used to work loss prevention off duty, where I'd catch people stealing, and I'd call people and I'd say, or I'd catch people someone stealing, and I'd say, okay, well, this person, stole this, especially if they're juveniles. I had to call their parents.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying, not my son. My son doesn't steal. And I'm like, no, I caught him stealing. And they're like, how? How did you do it? How did you see it? And they start questioning all this stuff. And you're like, no, I don't like doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here calling you because I really enjoy this whole process and what we're doing. I feel probably as bad as everybody involved right now.
Right.
And that, I think it's important for people to realize that it's not cops aren't out there to ruin anybody's day. We are scheduled to be there for a certain amount of hours,
mm-hmm.
for a certain time of the week. And we have to be there and we have to be productive. That's what your tax dollars are going for.
Mm-hmm.
We're not there to ruin anybody's day, most definitely. And even though that we do sometimes. And that's not the intention. It's just the job. And I remember last Two Not Cops, I was telling you about that horrible fights that I got in at Hobby Lobby. Well, I actually had one of our friends, I'll just say Jace. He was at the Walgreens right there by Hobby Lobby, and I was fighting this guy out in the parking lot of the Hobby Lobby. This is my second fight in 2 weeks. The first really bad one I told you all about last time, where I almost got all my clothes torn off in the vestibule area of Hobby Lobby, and I was fighting that crackhead. Same scenario happened again a week later with a guy trying to return items with a fake ID,
mm-hmm.
a stolen ID. And so I'm fighting this guy out in the parking lot, and Jace was over at the Walgreens filling out an accident report.
Yep.
And 34th and Bell. There's crashes over there all the time.
All the time.
So he pulled over into the Walgreens to fill out his accident report, and he could hear somebody yelling in the Hobby Lobby parking lot. That was me. He couldn't hear what I was yelling. He didn't know what was going on, but he at least was like, I better roll over there and see what's going on. Well, he goes over there, and I've got this dude in a reverse headlock because, at this point, I'd already tased the guy. We had already fought each other. I'm running out of options. Like, things are real.
Yeah.
And we're like halfway deep into this parking lot, and he pulls up and gets out of his car, and he sees us fighting. And all of a sudden, I don't even know he's there. I just see this blue blur, and that was his uniform. And he just form tackles this guy that I'm fighting right into the ground. And then he falls on top of him, and then I fall on top of him. And then we turn and look at each other, and he's like, oh, hey, Crowley. And I was like, what's up, man?
Hey, man.
And he's like, glad I tackled the right guy. I didn't know which one of y'all was the aggressor.
Yeah.
And can you imagine in that same scenario that Jace accidentally tackles me? Or a cop accidentally tackles me, and the guy gets up and runs off, and I'm like, dude. But it worked out great.
Yeah,
and
that was fortunate.
I always appreciated that. And another thing that I wanted to talk about was when we were talking about bad guys always being bad guys. There was an incident one night where we had a guy that was using copper drill bits to drill out gas tanks and siphon the fuel out of them and do all this stuff. But the process of that is ruining the entire gas tank.
Right.
And he was going around the county and hitting these people all over the place. And so one night I came across a car, and it was parked on the shoulder of the road out in the middle of the county, no big deal. But across from there was a landscaping and tree service company. And they had it's almost like a nursery type area. And so I checked out with the vehicle just because sometimes we get abandoned vehicles, or you get someone whose vehicle is broken down, and we're here to help them.
Code 54.
Code 54. And so as I'm sitting there, I look, and I'm shining my spotlight onto the car, and I don't see anybody in there. And I'm like, yeah, surely someone's already checked out with this vehicle. And I'm about to leave, and then all of a sudden I see that quick head peek where he looks in his mirror to see, I just see a little bit of the shoulder rock in the head, head peek. I'm like, oh, gotcha.
Got him, yep.
I walk up to the car, I look in the back, funnels, hoses, drills. All this guy's got the burglary items in the back seat of his car.
The toolkit.
Yeah. He's got, what did they call that? What was the implements of burglary implements or something? I remember there used to be actual.
Yeah.
Used to be, man, if you don't use it, you lose it.
That's so true.
Anyways, I'm sitting there and he's right across from there and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I got this guy like dead to rights. Only problem was all the gas containers in his vehicle were empty.
Mm-hmm.
I checked across the street and none of the vehicles had been hit. And so I knew that I called my sergeant, which is the guy that I've spoke of before. Really good guy. We're talking about it on the phone and he's like, this sucks, but we're going to have to cut him loose.
Yep.
We don't have enough to actually say that this is the guy. And so I walked back to his car and I'm getting ready to do that. I'm like, golly, I can't believe I have to do this. And then I was so focused on this burglary charge that I went blind as far as like, I'm only looking for one thing.
Right.
I've got this guy's ID clipped underneath the pin of my shirt. And I'm getting ready to pull it out and I look down at the center console and there's a baggie of meth on the center console that had literally been sitting there the whole time. We're 30 minutes into this traffic stop, not even traffic stop, this code 54 suspicion. And it had been sitting there the whole time. And he was so worried about what I was doing that he never even noticed because it was sitting in front of the shifter.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't really see it and I couldn't really see it. But I looked down, I'm like,
got him.
Oh, hey man, step out of the car for a second. He steps out and then I pick it up and I'm like, what's this? And he's like, oh man. And I was like, okay, so he didn't go to jail for any of the burglaries.
Right.
Odd fact though, did you know that after I arrested that guy for felony possession of a controlled substance, all those crimes stopped?
That is so bizarre.
It's weird, huh?
Seemingly just a coincidence.
Must have been a coincidence.
For sure.
But I towed his vehicle back to our impound lot so that we could search it and we can actually look through there. And then the detectives that were assigned the case, they tried to get him to confess. You know, they tried to get a confession for the other stuff by saying, hey, what are you using these things for?
Right.
And the guy would not. I mean, he's a convict. If that's not a derogatory term now, I don't know if it is or not. It's just, it changes every day, but
it does.
He was a convict and he knew what to say and what not to say.
Right.
And he said nothing. And so we still had him on the felony possession of controlled substance and we didn't get him for that. But I was like, I got my eye on you.
Mm-hmm.
You get out of jail,
Yep.
I'll be watching you.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking for you, bud.
Mm-hmm.
If I see you even cross the road, not at a crosswalk, getting you.
Getting you, yeah.
Yeah.
And you run across people like that all the time, and then you run across the everyday person. That's one of the things that used to be difficult about working in the jails whenever you got somebody that's got, it's just a regular everyday person, and they've got warrants out there for their arrest for writing bad checks.
Yeah.
And you're like, golly. And you're walking up there, and you're like, I'm just going to use an example of a lady that one time that I had to arrest, but you walk up to the car. She's got 3 kids in the car. Everything's going bad. It's hair's a mess. The job. And you're like, hey, you've got some warrants out for your arrest. And they're like, for what? And I'm like, hot checks. And they're like, okay, well, I'll call the DA's office or whatever tomorrow. We'll get it all figured out. And I'm like, yeah, see, that's unfortunately.
Yeah, I can't do that.
I got to take you to jail. And they're like, what? And then, as I told y'all guys last time, there's some wild things that happen in there, but we do, I think that in the jail that I worked at, we did a really good job to keep your everyday average person away from your not so much everyday average person.
Right. And it is really unfortunate because I was definitely surprised, and most people would be, that people can get warrants for, of course, just bad decisions that they make, that they didn't have any criminal intent. They just did something wrong. Yeah.
They thought they were doing something that they thought they had to do at the time. And so it's saying like, oh, I'm going to I know this check's going to overdraft my account, but I have to buy food.
Right.
Like, yeah, trust me, I sympathize with that 100%. Of course. And I hate that. But then you also get in that position where, as a law enforcement officer, you have a warrant from a judge that said you shall arrest if you come in contact with this person. That means you'll do it.
That's right. And shall in Texas law enforcement legalese means you will do it. It's non-negotiable. If you get a warrant and it has shall in it, you're arresting that person. That's not up to you. And if they find out that you ran into that, you made contact with that person and you did not make an arrest, that's a bad mark on your record.
Yeah, and just to drive that point home, we used to get warrants in our box to go around and, you know, arrest people if you have downtime. So you go out and you knock on doors and see if people were home and you arrest them. Just to show you that this is real, the shall part of it. One of my buddies, that I worked with, he called me and he's like, "Hey, I'm about to go run this warrant. Do you want to go with me?" Because on midnights we do a lot of the felony warrants. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a felony could be a non-violent crime, you know, drug crime, stuff like that. So I'm not just saying like all these people are bad people, but he's like, "Hey, do you want to go run this warrant with me?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And, you know, we had the little zip shirts in the front. And so a lot of times we'd unzip that little part of the shirt and we'd put the warrant in there, you know, and we'd hold it that way. We'd have our hands free. But, me and this guy that I worked with, we get out and we're walking up to the house. I'm like, "Who you got?" And he says the guy's last name and I don't think anything about it. I'm like, "Okay." And then we always had kind of a custom where he'd unzip the shirt and he'd hand me the warrant. I'd look at the warrant and look at the picture because it'd have the picture of the person on there. And I see the person. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I know this guy. Like, we're friends. Like, we know each other. When we knock on the door and he sees me standing there, we're going to recognize each other because we are familiar."
Right.
And I was like, "Man, I know this guy." And he's like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And it's not like, do you want to get in the car and leave or do you want to call him and take care? I'm not saying that you couldn't maybe do that, but if you got caught doing that, you get in trouble. But I said, "Let me talk to him." Yeah. And he's like, "Sure, man, go for it." And so I knocked on the door and he answered the door and I was like, "Hey, here's the situation." And he was like, "All right, cool, man. I know, you know, you're just doing your job." And I was like, "Thank goodness," because that can go a lot of different, directions. We're still friends to this day, by the way.
Well, I'm glad that worked out. Yeah. It could have been much worse if it was somebody else, but you got it handled. Yep. Yeah, no, you get a lot of warrants, especially if they know that you're going to have time, or you may even be put on a directed patrol, and which means that you're going to go exclusively do that and go like knock down warrants and try to find people, or at least gather as much information as you can on that person. Depending on the level of the offense, you know, you're going to, that really dictates how hard you're going to try to find them. If it's like a violent crime, or they're like a career criminal or career scumbag, as I commonly would say, then, you know, you want to get them because the longer they're on the street, the more people they're taking advantage of. They're thieving. They're, you know, just being a bad person. And so you want to knock them down, take them to jail, keep them off the street. But another thing I used to work on all the time in my downtime, which was infrequent but still happened, was, you know, you get to learn your area and you run traffic. Yeah. When it's late at night. And so these neighborhoods, especially residentials, that's where I specifically targeted people running stop signs and stoplights because, I mean, as a cop, you're going to see people that are crossing the street, riding their bike, playing, you know, rolling out in the street in their residential, playing around and get smoked by a car. Yeah. Because they're not paying attention, or, you know, you're crossing that intersection, someone just runs a stop sign because they don't see you, blam. Yeah. That person's day's ruined. And I had a specific intersection that I used to watch. And this was the particular stop that I made that went to court. The only one that ever did. Most of them plea out or the charges are dropped. You still got to show up anyway. Mm-hmm. But I used to sit back next to this church, and I would be facing the intersection about 150 feet off. So I was out of the street light, and I was all darked out. And I would just sit there and watch it because at this particular intersection, the street light was right above the stop sign at the right angle so that when my camera would engage, you could clearly see the edge of the red that indicated the stop sign. So you could see it was a stop sign. And I used to get people all the time. Yeah. I could write 4 or 5 tickets in just a couple hours because people would just be zipping straight through this. And this one time, I'm sitting there and I just hear, whoo, this car just zips on by. So I engage my lights, which takes your camera back about 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. It's always recording. Yeah. Very important to realize. So when you're watching like videos online of cop chases or whatever, and it clicks on, you're not getting any sound, that's not a defect. It's not recording yet, but the video goes back about 30 seconds.
Yeah, ours went back 2 minutes.
Dang. Yep. DPS does even further, I believe. Yeah. Like theirs is always technically on. Yeah. I think. So I engage my lights. I run them down real quick. He sees my lights. He knows it's him. So I walk up and I'm like, hey, man, my name's Officer Smith with the Amarillo Police Department. The reason I stopped you is because you blew through that stop sign. And he's like, no, I didn't. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to argue with you. I know what I saw, and I have my camera engaged, so I'm going to need you to, I need your driver's license and your insurance, which he did have both of those things. But he was very passionately about to argue that he did not run the stop sign. So I go back, I run him. He's good, no warrants. So I'm like, okay. So I just write him a citation for a ran stop sign like I've done, a couple dozen times at this point, dozens maybe. And I walk back over and I'm like, here. And he's like, and now he has his, who I can only assume is his old lady in the passenger seat. She's like, he did not run that stop sign. I'm like, well, I'm not going to argue. This isn't an admission of guilt. This is just a promise to appear. I know what I saw and I have it on video. Fast forward a pretty significant chunk of time. It had to be 6 to 8 months. And I get a subpoena for this guy, and he wants to go to jury trial on this stop sign ticket. And sure enough, we go, and we show up, and of course I get called up to the stand. You do the real basic stuff. You sit there, kind of neutrally, trying to look professional in your uniform. They ask you a bunch of questions. They identify you. They ask you about how long you've been there. They ask a lot of really weird questions that you wouldn't think they'd ask. They ask your name, your rank at the, what academy you went through. They get all of your pedigree, basically.
Yeah.
So that the city can prove that you're a person capable of writing said ticket. And then, of course, it switches over, and this guy now gets to question me. And I'll never forget, because he doesn't know, or maybe he didn't know, but he sure knows now that all he did was just shoot himself in the foot.
Yeah.
And he's like, you said that you saw me do this. And I'm like, yeah, I saw you run the stop sign. And he's like, well, I didn't. You just think you saw that. And I can tell you why. And he walks over and he hands me the driver's manual for the state of Texas. Like the one you get when you're in driver's training.
Oh, yeah, the little yellow one with the stop lights on it.
Yeah, you can pick it up at your local DMV if the line isn't too long. Mm-hmm. And so he has the page marked, and he wants me to read how stop signs work.
Nice.
So I do. The actual one in the description, where if there's a white line present, you stop before the white line. If there's no white line present, you stop parallel with
the pole, right?
The pole of the stop sign, right? You have to stop. Basically, it comes down to that only. To just a regular patrol cop, you just gotta stop. If you want to do a crammy and stop real quick, let me see a head swivel. You can go. I'm gonna let that slide.
Yeah,
you stopped. This dude didn't.
You know it's a stop because the ground stopped moving.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if you want to do a little break, like go.
You know what? I'll even let that slide, provided I see the head swivel, like you looked around. So I read the thing, and the whole time I'm reading, I'm like, does this guy know? I'm like, when does the video come up?
Yeah.
And so
I feel like a lot of this is unnecessary.
It is, yeah. And so I read the thing, and he's like, and he's so sure. He's like, as you can see, judging by the description that you just read, I did not run a stop sign. And so he gets done. And so they're like, and then the prosecutor's like, so I do have, Officer Smith, was your car's video and audio working that evening? I was like, yes. And she's like, and when does it activate? I'm like, it engages when I turn on my lights. Which I didn't go to siren, of course. I just did the lights. Most people
code 2
with your lights. Yeah, most people get it. If they see the red and blues, they're like, oh, okay, that's probably for me. Mm-hmm. Provided I don't zip right by you to the person beyond. And so I'm like, yeah, it was working. And she's like, okay. And that downloaded at the PD, and we have that. And so she turns, and they bring down like a little white screen. Oh, and they get the camera all set up. And the whole time I'm just like, I look over, and this dude's just sitting there he's very sure of himself. Yeah. And the whole time I'm trying not to smile because I'm like, this dude's roasted.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they bring it up, and it's just a bunch of silence and darkness and this one street light. And then, and you just, no audio, of course. I made that sound up. Duh. But you just see his car just whip right through. You could see the headlights illuminating the ground right through the intersection. And this is a jury trial. So there are people that are going to decide his fate.
Yeah.
And I, of course, as soon as I saw the video, my head whipped over to who was watching, and most of them did like a pretty obvious like eye roll or like affirming nod, like, yeah, he just ran that. And so he ended up getting, getting
A fine.
a fine, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't even a high one. They actually can choose that to a degree. The jury can. I think it was only $100 even. But I just smiled at the guy, and I was like, not like goading him on or anything, but I just smiled like, oh, man, I had you.
Dude, yeah.
Take the L. And so, of course, when we're getting up to leave, now my part is done. I'm fixing to go home. It's my day off.
Yeah.
I'm going to go home and get out of my uniform. And that dude, he kind of pats me on the arm as I walk by. He's like, it's nothing personal. It's just business. And I was like, I know, man, that's all it was.
I agree.
I was like, that's all it was to me, bud.
Yeah.
And I just smiled.
Goes back to Roadhouse, man.
That's it.
It's nothing personal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
That's right. It ain't nothing personal. But I just remember that guy was just so sure of himself. And that's why it's so important to have functioning video and audio.
Yeah.
You would be surprised. Now, this is obviously a very light example of how important it is.
Yeah.
And we have dozens of stories of where it'll become more important. But I just remember that because I was still kind of new.
Yeah, we're just walking. We're baby stepping up through this thing.
We're baby stepping up to it, yeah. But I just remember that. That's the only time I ever went to court. A lot of times, even on bigger offenses, they don't need you if you're just a patrol officer, unless it's something heinous and you were the first person there and you got to see all the blood and gore and the madness ensuing. But more often than not, you're going to court for the tickets you wrote. Yeah. And stuff like that.
Yeah. I used to have a spot that I used to check out for stop sign and a lot of times, people have to realize that sometimes we get calls from the public saying people run this stop sign all the time. Can y'all do something? Mm-hmm. So we have to go check. But in this particular incident, it wasn't like that. But there used to be, there was a Ford dealership over off the highway. Mm-hmm. And on the service road, there's 4-way stop sign. And at night, man, people will just blow this thing all the time, just blow right through it. Yep. Coming off the service road, just go right through it. And we'd have crashes there, and it was out in the county. And so depending on where somebody is at, it could take longer to get there. The car crashes were terrible. We had a lady that was walking on the side of the road there one time. She got run over. Ugh. She was holding her baby, and she was able to shield the baby, and it lived, but she died just right there on the side of the road next to where I'm talking about.
That's tragedy.
And so I used to park in between the cars at the car dealership. So as you're going down, and that used to make people so mad because they would look and they're like, wait, where were you? And I was like, I was parked in the car dealership. I'd park in between the cars, and then I could see the stop sign. So as you're coming by, it's just car lot.
Oh, man.
And man, so boom, they'd run that stop sign. I'd pull out and get behind them, and they're like, where were you?
Do you know what's so funny when you talk about that is I can recall several instances where somebody tried to tell me that it was illegal for an officer to do that because it's not fair.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's nuts. People are like, wait, you can't hide. I'm like, yes, I can.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it if I was just sitting in the open.
Yeah.
That's a preventative patrol measure.
Yep.
Sure. But I'm trying to catch people that are doing it. They're like, well, you can't. It's illegal. You can't write me a ticket if you were hiding. I'm like, where on earth did you hear that?
Someone told me one time that a DPS trooper could not write you a ticket if they weren't wearing their cowboy hat.
That is amazing.
And I was like, well, I'm not sure about that.
Well, you know what?
But boy, I'll look into it.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and say that's not true.
That's not true.
But boy, it's a weird day when you catch a trooper without their hat.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had so I was going to go back. I had another situation, and then I want to go through real quick after I do this I want to go through, I think this would be a good time to talk about like common traffic stop scenarios and what you should do in that situation. But
yeah, it is
similar to what you had. I had a guy that I was sitting behind him at a stoplight in the middle of the day. I was going through town, just like I was talking about. I'm going through town, driving out. I'm on evenings, sitting at a stoplight. It's about 2:30 in the afternoon. There's a guy in front of me, and I'm behind him
in a marked patrol
marked patrol car, sitting right behind him, and he's sitting there. And I can see him. He takes a drink of something, sticks his hand out the window, sets it on the side of his window, and he's a passenger. Sits it on the side of the window, and I'm like, "You guys drinking a Bud Light? Just right there, right in front of me, open container. Do I have to do anything about it? Not necessarily. It's Class C. I get to make that choice." Then he takes a pull off of it, chunks the can out the window, and I'm like,
"That's a twofer."
Now I am. Mm-hmm. And so we clear the light, get going a little bit. I turn on my lights. Go pull him over. and I walk up to the passenger side window and I'm like, "How you doing?" And this is one of the things I'll just go ahead and start with this. In a traffic stop, I think it's really important. And the county that I worked at had a 7-step violator process. And I don't know if you guys ran a similar 7-step violator process, but really what it comes down to is, have you ever seen somebody on the videos that get pulled over and the guy walks up to, the police officer walks up or whatever. He's like, "Give me your license and your insurance." And then the person's like, "Excuse me, what did I do?"
Yeah.
There's a real easy way for any department in the United States or across the world to avoid this.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the 7-step violator process.
Yeah.
This is what you do when you walk. I can't remember the steps exactly because it's been a while, but this is what you do when you walk up. You walk up, you don't say, "Hey, how you doing?" or "Hey, bud," or like whenever you write somebody a ticket and you're like, "Have a nice day."
Mm-hmm.
Don't say stuff like that because people are like, "You son of a,"
Right. Yeah.
You just say, I always said, "Be careful getting back on the road."
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, "Here's your warning," or "Here's your citation. This is how you take care of it. This traffic stop is complete. Be careful getting back on the road." And I'd walk back to my vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
But in a 7-step violator, you start out by saying, "My name is Deputy Crowley. I'm with the Randall County Sheriff's Department." You said your name. You said the department you work for. "The reason I'm stopping you is for fill in the blank. I'm going to need to see your driver's license and your proof of insurance." And then in that, you've already gone through like four of the steps, but you want to identify yourself, identify what department you work for. Then you want to tell them what the offense is, and then you want to ask them for their information after you've already completed that. So all those questions that they might have are gone, and someone might say, "I didn't run that stop sign." You say, "Listen, the reason I stopped you is for failure to stop at a stop sign. I need to see your license and your insurance."
Right.
And then you can take it from there. And most people are like, "Ah, man," like this guy that threw the beer can out the window. He's like, I walked up to the passenger side and I was talking to the guy, and the driver is sitting there. He's a younger kid, and this is an older man. And he's like, "Sir, do you need to see my driver's license and insurance?" And I was like, "No, I don't." And he's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "Because I'm not here to talk to you. I'm here to talk to him. I didn't pull you over for a traffic stop. I pulled you over because he's in your car, but he threw a beer can out the window.
And that's how it works.
I don't need to speak to you."
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people will start rounding up IDs and stuff like that, and that's a different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I get the information from the guy, and I write him open container, and I write him for littering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, got him. Twofer.
And he goes to court and pleads not guilty. And then, so we have to show up.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to JP Court, which is Justice of the Peace Court. I show up, and I've got my disc with me because I burned I had the whole thing on camera.
Right, yeah.
And I showed up, and he was represented by somebody, which I couldn't believe. Like
he got a lawyer and everything.
He got a lawyer for a Class C offense. And I'm standing there, and they're like, "Okay, before we go in there, we just want to make sure that both sides." When we were standing there talking to the judge, everybody's kind of present. They're like, "Before we go in there, just want to make sure that everybody's got. We're not gonna. You want to actually do a trial, and we're not changing. Nobody's changing their minds. There's no new evidence." And I'm like, "Hey, I want to go ahead and turn my video in for evidence."
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Okay." And he's like, "This is the incident." And I'm like, "Yep." It's got him throwing the beer can out the window, the whole 9 yards, all the way up to me walking up to him. And the guy's like, "Oh, you had that on camera?" And he's like, I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Nah, guilty."
Classic.
Yeah. And I just turned around and walked out, and that was it. So the reason that I brought that up is because I wanted to get into that. A lot of times with traffic stops, it's upsetting for people. For police officers, it's very routine.
Yeah.
And I think we can get complacent in that, and run your 7-step violator. If you're a police officer and listen to this, if you don't have a policy, just do it yourself.
That's true.
You don't have to do that, but it knocks out all of those questions that somebody might have. Yeah. And it also sets things up for the traffic stop to go a little better.
Right. Yeah. It is a de-escalator. And they train us the same. They train them the same at APD. So you'll walk up and you'll greet them by saying your name and your position, and then move straight into why you pulled them over.
Yeah. And it works a lot better if you're just the guy that walks up and you're like, "License and insurance."
Yeah.
Come on, man. Like, you're taking it personal.
Yeah. For our listeners elsewhere, you don't have to ask for a registration in the state of Texas because there's a little sticker on their windshield If it's present, you know they have one. If it's not present, make sure their tag is, you'll already know because when you pulled them over, you'll have read off their tag and your location. So that's why we ask for just the DL and
we don't
insurance.
we don't ask for registration because we can figure it out really easy if you have it or not. And we can also figure out if you have insurance on your car. Like some people are like, oh, I lost my insurance card. A lot of times we can figure out if you have
That's true, yeah.
insurance.
Plus, I mean, many times when I was still a cop, people pull it up on their phone.
Yeah.
As long as they could. And now the state of Texas does require that you have a copy on your person or in your vehicle. But I'd let them slide.
Yeah.
As long as they could pull it up and it was current.
Yes.
So if they pull up the digital copy on their phone and they show it to me and everything's good, I'm going to let that slide. Some guys don't. I always did because that's almost exactly what I do most of the time because, I mean, if you're not careful, you're going to find yourself without your paper insurance.
Yeah.
Like proof of insurance.
Yeah. And so that is, having said that, we can verify that you have insurance on your car, but you can also still get a ticket for not having proof of insurance on you, like having the paper copy or having a digital copy.
And that's rough.
And that really stinks. I wouldn't do that, but yeah, that's definitely something that can come up. And so I think that in a position of a traffic stop, I know a lot of people don't think that a lot of traffic stops are necessary. I know people that hate motorcycle cops and everything that they do.
Well, yeah, specifically in the city of Amarillo. That is what they do. Yeah. Now, they do other things too, but their primary purpose is enforcement of traffic.
Yes.
And so if you're like, man, motorcycle cops, they're just big old D-bags.
Yeah.
All they're doing is trying to get that quota. Well, you're right. They are trying to get you for traffic violations, but there ain't no quota. They can do it all day, and they do.
They do it all day, every day.
They write hundreds of tickets a week. The statistics would startle you. That is literally what they do for their entire shift. And they're good at it. And, you know, I believe that you should pay for your offenses. And it's like a civil responsibility. But still, they'll get you.
And I also understand that, you know, not having a driver's license and not having the money to pay surcharges. But I think they got rid of surcharges. Is that correct? In the state of Texas? I can't remember if they did or not. Someone told me at one point.
Someone will probably tell us here in the podcast
that they got rid of surcharges. And I understand that people can get in scenarios where they don't have money in their insurance laps, or they got several tickets and they couldn't pay for them, so now there's surcharges on their driver's license, and now it's suspended, and they can't, but they're trying to get to work. These are all things that come down to the individual police officer.
That's right.
I know that there are more times than I can count that I pulled somebody over and they gave me the story of what I just spoke about.
Right.
Now, if you're in your work uniform and you're heading to work, or you got, you look like you're pretty squared away, even though people's incomes can be different, whatever the case may be, officer discretion says that I don't necessarily have to write them a ticket.
Right.
I don't have to do these certain things. Now, can you run across a police officer that arrests you and tows your vehicle for those same offenses that I wouldn't have arrested you for? Yes.
Yeah, you sure can.
And it's the luck of the draw, basically, on who you get and maybe what kind of day they're having.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody, I hope that if someone's having a bad day, they don't go to work and decide that they're going to arrest somebody that day. I hope that's not what you're basing your day off of, as to what kind of day you're having. But you have to understand that there is a process, there are laws, and there is officer discretion. And so if people are treated differently in some scenarios versus others, there could be a whole different range of reasons why that happened. And you're not going to get the same outcome as your buddy on every single, the coin doesn't flip on heads every single time.
Right.
Every now and then you hit that tails and you're like, oh man.
Yeah. So they train you that you are supposed to make your mind up.
Oh yeah, that's also one of the 7 steps.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, that was in there too.
But I'm leading into how to be pulled over.
Yeah.
Like we wanted to talk about. And so they train you that you have to have already made your mind up.
Before you see the person,
right.
You see the offense and you think in your head, that's a ticket.
Right. And you know what? That is a really good guideline.
Yep.
I'm not going to say it was a rule for me because I want to know who I'm talking to. I want to know what's going on. And I'm not saying like if you were just acting like a douche, I'd write you a ticket anyway. Because a lot of times I wouldn't. I did try to stick to that. But also, you know, if you get up there and it's someone struggling, maybe be different. But the point of this is that when you get pulled over, because even I've been pulled over many times, and I even have a couple accolades because I've been pulled over by state troopers and didn't get a ticket.
Yep.
Speeding in a construction zone, got away with a warning. Pretty rare.
Yeah, that didn't work out for me so well one time.
Yeah. So, but the point is, you know, you pull over in a safe spot. Of course, that's your right, you know, and, you know, don't unbuckle or nothing. Just casually start digging out your driver's license, your proof of insurance if you need it, and wait for the officer to approach. I roll down my driver's side window, but if it's dark, I also roll down my passenger side window.
Yeah.
Because if it's dark out, a lot of times the officer would like to approach from the passenger side so they're not standing in the road.
And if your windows are tinted, roll down all your windows.
And even if I'm mad that I got
Turn your
pulled
dome light on if it's dark outside.
Sure. And you know what? That's good because that officer's also like, oh, okay. This person's cognizant of that. Plus, it also lets that officer know that you're not shady and that you're not trying to dig out a weapon.
Yep.
Or anything like that, because that's a real threat, and always has been to police officers. And so I wait for the officer to walk up, and this is what everybody should do. Just let him finish the spiel. Just let him. Don't. I mean, even if they're all huffy, like, man, what were you doing? I pulled you up for this. Grr. You're like, oh, okay.
All right.
Let him finish, and then be like, yep, you got me. Yeah, I did do that. It's really unfortunate. Or, you know, if you want to insert this in this time, you to try to bargain, go ahead. But I'm saying, don't do that. Just have your information ready. Let them finish their spiel and give them their documents they request. It's that simple. And you would be surprised how many cops out there are not going to want to write you a ticket.
Yep.
And if you're thinking, that sounds counterintuitive to what you just told me, you can take my word for it or don't. But I know that I've gotten away with some warnings when I should have got a citation. So if any of those listeners are them dudes, thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
But also, it's just part of being tactful. Mm-hmm. Don't be rude. I'm not going to argue. And besides, I can't stress enough, people, the side of the road or wherever it is you get pulled over is not the time.
The place.
Yeah, you're not going to win. It doesn't matter what you try to say, what you pull out of the hat and be like, look, this is why this happened. It wasn't me. It's not the place. That officer does not care. He's just doing his job.
Yep.
He or she is just doing their job. Take the citation, take the warning, be polite, and then be on your way. And if you're leaving back onto the roadway, don't forget your turn signal.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're being nasty. Yeah. And I always say that, I always waited until the law enforcement officer got to my window before I even go for an ID or insurance or anything like that. Like I said, I'd roll your windows down. If it's nighttime, roll the windows all the way down. Turn the dome light on, especially if your windows are tinted, so that when they're walking up, that threat is automatically eliminated. It makes them feel a little more at ease walking up there. And you don't know how much they appreciate that.
Yeah.
Walking up to a vehicle, they have no idea what's about to happen. The windows are tinted. You got your window cracked because F Johnny Law and we don't care about him and all this stuff. Now the situation's already elevated.
Yeah.
This officer's their senses are elevated.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to figure out everything that's going on, and they're like, okay, if they go to walk up to the car and and it's 2:00 in the morning and all the windows down and the dome lights on and your hands are sitting at 10 and 2, they can see your hands.
Yeah.
They can see inside the whole car. They can see everything. They're like,
exactly.
Okay. And then they walk up and they're like, hey, I've done that before. And, I've had an officer walk up and they're like, hey, thanks for that.
Yeah. And you should, and police officers should be thanking people for that, because a lot of people aren't going to do that because they want you to be nervous. They want you to be scared. And any cop will tell you it is scary. If you walk up on a good old hood rat jalopy in the middle of the night and they got all their windows and it's tinted and you can't see nothing, even with your flashlight beam and your spotlight and your takedowns, you're nervous, because what if this is the time that somebody rolls down that window and just bucks a couple rounds off at you?
Yep.
Does that sound like a reasonable fear? Maybe to some people it's not, but it happens all the time in this country. All the time. So you are nervous and maybe a little, over-prepared to react because you don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of times, nothing does. But sometimes it does.
Majority of the time, it doesn't happen. But if you take away that feeling that they might have, I truly believe that's going to go well for you.
It surely does. And just like with being polite, having your information ready, letting them finish talking, because I can tell you for sure, I did not like being interrupted.
Yeah.
And who does? That's not because I'm a cop. That's because I'm a person.
Yeah.
If I'm walking up and I'm like, hey, I'm Officer Smith, and they're like, man, I didn't even do nothing. And I'm like,
can I finish?
Hello, I'm Officer Smith.
Yeah.
With the Amarillo Police Department. And the reason I pulled you over is this. Like we said, you can't stress it enough.
Yeah.
You can't argue.
And then also, I know in the state of Texas, the reason this works this way, I'm pretty sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I know a lot of people always get mad because they say, well, I don't have to sign a ticket. Or, if I get a ticket, I don't have to sign it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Now, listen, I don't know if this has been explained, but the reason for that is because whenever you're issued a citation, it's basically the officer writing you a ticket for a traffic violation, and then you have to appear in court. What that signature tells them, and that's why they say it is not an admission of guilt, it is just a promise to appear.
Right.
And that literally is all it is.
Yeah.
And if you don't sign, or if you sign that ticket, that means that you acknowledge that the traffic stop happened.
Mm-hmm.
You were issued a citation, and when you don't show up to court, that is how they can issue a warrant for a Class C misdemeanor.
Right.
Warrant.
I'm glad you brought this up because a lot of people may not know that.
Yeah.
So.
And if you don't sign the ticket, the reason why they say, okay, well, if you're not going to sign the ticket, you're going to go to jail. Because if you don't sign the ticket, then there's no accountability if you don't show up in court.
Right.
And so what the reason for the arrest is because they take you to jail so that A, you either have to bond out and then go see a magistrate later,
mm-hmm.
or B, you're going to arraignment in which you will be arraigned on the charge by a judge right then.
Right.
And so it's one of those things like, I ain't signing that ticket. And I know a lot of people, some departments I've seen nowadays are just like, okay, fine. And then they walk off. No, there's a process and a purpose for that.
Right.
And I know that a lot of people get angry because they say, oh, I'm not signing that ticket. I didn't do that, so I'm not signing it. No, I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I get what you're saying, especially if you get a ticket and you didn't deserve one. Do cops make mistakes? Absolutely.
Of course.
It happens.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen all the time. It happens sometimes, but can it be a mistake? Yes, it can be a mistake. Like Mike said earlier, on the side of the road is not where you handle that.
That's right.
And if you are courteous the whole time, I'm not saying that you have to. I'm not telling you what to do. But what I am saying is if you are courteous, you have a chance of getting off. I think your chances of getting off with a warning go up significantly.
For sure.
But if you say, I'm not signing that ticket, and they say you're going to jail, oh, you're trying to flex on me and take me to jail now? No, that's the process, sir. There's nothing else I can do.
That's true.
You don't sign the ticket, that means I have to take you and put you in front of a magistrate. Or I have to have a bond company come get you out of jail that'll vouch that you'll show up and take care of this ticket. So you know what the easiest thing to do is?
Just sign it.
Just sign it. Just sign it, and if it's wrong, then show up in court and defend yourself. But please don't get into this battle on the side of the road where you end up getting pulled out of the car, and then now you're saying, like, now I'm being arrested unlawfully. And so now you start fighting. And now you're going to jail with those tickets and also resisting arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever else happens from that.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
There's this stigma that, or I mean, not so much a stigma, but there's this thing going around where people feel like you have to resist.
Right.
Resist the cop,
That's
the
right.
bad
Resist
people.
the man.
Resist the man. These are all just processes.
That's right. It's really important to think about those things because this is literally a law that this person wearing the uniform is obligated to enforce. It doesn't matter if you personally think it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
They are still going to do it. And the more that you try to fight back, which we'll have many, many stories about that in later episodes of the Two Non-Cops, is that they're just trying to do it, and you need to follow that because the harder that you think that you're resisting the man, the more trouble you're going to get in. And not everybody's got a Cochran they can call to get you off for that.
Yeah.
So you're going to dig yourself a mighty big hole, and all they wanted to do is get you to say that you acknowledge the ticket and you're going to show up to court to deal with it.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous if you've ever seen a traffic stop video where at the conclusion of that video, someone lost their life, whether it be the person who was driving the car, a passenger, or the police officer.
That's right.
Someone died over a traffic stop.
Mm-hmm. It's a waste.
Yeah,
and highly unfortunate.
Yeah, sign the ticket and move on. And I think we got a lot of a different. I mean, some of this was scheduled into the part 2, and some of it wasn't. I think that's one of the good things about the Two Not Cops is we can kind of really get on here and spin some yarn, but moreover, we want to give you at least something in each episode where we kind of try to either bridge a gap between civilian and law enforcement, or we explain a process that goes between the two.
That's right. Yeah, and just be realistic about it, because most cops, they're just people too, and they're going to be real with you. Because you can take this this golden oldie that the cops don't like to do paperwork, even if you want to look at it like that. So if you're cool, that's less paperwork. You might skate.
Yep.
Or you might not. However you want to look at it. That's just one more little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And so we're gonna keep these going. I think we'll go on the format unless anybody says differently. But I think it's cool to do the 4 episodes that are 3 episodes. Yeah, no, 4 episodes.
It's 4, yeah.
That are part 1s, part 2s.
Mm-hmm.
Me doing one, and then you coming in on the debrief, and then we'll do a debrief together over that. Because I don't know if you guys enjoyed.
Susan Kuhnhausen.
Susan Kuhnhausen. I love that one. That was I had fun doing that one. And then we'll bring you a Two Not Cops. So it'd be 10 episode blocks,
right?
Basically. And so this is episode 20. I can't believe we made it to episode 10. I'm really excited about that. I can't wait till we're doing this again, because that means it'll be episode 30.
That's right.
And we brought you guys 9 episodes just in August.
That's right.
And so we want to keep the streak alive. We want to keep it going. If you have any questions, or if you have, Two Not Cops is also a place where if you have a particular question about something that you may not know about, or you don't know the process of, and this is the time to reach out to us and say, hey, this happened to me one time, or I know a guy that or whatever, or I have a question concerning whatever. This is where you can ask the question. You know, send us an email, hit us up on social media and ask a question and say, hey, can you cover this in the next episode of Two Not Cops? And we'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is a time to get educated, or make it a question you've been curious about, or one that you think is weird, or you saw something happen between somebody else and a police officer and you're like, what on earth happened here? Or even obscure, like this murderer got pulled over one time and the cops didn't arrest him. Why didn't they? Yeah. Great question. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. This is a time for Mike and I to definitely tell some awesome stories, which we want to do.
Yeah.
It's part of I think every lawman's or woman's one of their favorite pastimes, if you will.
Absolutely,
is like telling some cop stories. They're fun. But really it's to answer your questions.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're here. We're doing this. We want to talk about cases, and we want to answer questions about cases or theories or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And then Two Not Cops this is everybody's chance to chime in and let us answer questions that you have.
For sure.
So I think we're going to leave it there for this episode of Two Not Cops, and I look forward to talking to you guys again, and Mike as well. We really like putting the podcast together and doing these Two Not Cop episodes. So that's going to do it for us. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the episode. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate your support. Our numbers are going up, the downloads are going up, and we cannot thank you enough. If you're looking for us on any of the social media platforms, you can find us on Facebook at The Murder Project. If you need to search for us, type in facebook.com/podcasttmp. If you're looking for us on the old Instagrams, we are at The Murder Project. And if you're looking for us on the Twitter machine, we are at The Murder Pod. Also, we'd like to remind everybody, please, please, please go on and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on Apple, please subscribe. Hit that 5 stars.
5 stars.
And leave us a review so that we can read it on the show. It also helps us get past the algorithm It seems to be working at this point, so please, if you're thinking about it or you haven't done it, stop right now, go do it. We'd really appreciate it. Also, if you want to leave us a longer form comment or question, you can reach us by email. If you need to email us, it is contact@themurderproject.com. And Mike and I, myself, or both of us will get back to you. We always do. We're going to leave it for this episode. We thank you guys for tuning in and listening to us. We look forward to talking to you again. But before we go, please remember,
Head up, eyes up,
and stay alive.